As South Africa assumes the G20 presidency, Cyril Ramaphosa has begun initiating measures to advance interests and matters of developing countries to the global fore. Now, South Africa is the first African country to lead the G20, which was set up to bolster economic cooperation among leading developed and emerging economies and include 19 sovereign nations along the European Union and the African Union. Experts have observed that South Africa's G20 presidency will avail the continent the opportunity to bring its challenges to the global stage. Now, let's have more details of that in this report.
The G20 comprises many of the world's largest developing and developed economies and seeks to find solutions to global economic and financial challenges. More than 40 heads of state are expected to gather here in South Africa for the G20 summit in November next year. President Cyril Ramaphosa says South Africa is determined to use the G20 summit to advance the interests of emerging economies on the world stage in matters of climate change, conflict and trade.
South Africa's G20 presidency takes place at a moment and at a time in which the world is facing a number of serious challenges. The climate crisis is worsening and widening. Across the world, billions of people are affected by underdevelopment, inequality, poverty, hunger, as well as massive unemployment. Working together with the G20 members and building partnerships that are essential to resolving these problems, we will use this moment to bring development priorities of the African continent and more broadly the global south more firmly onto the agenda of the G20.
Some analysts highlighted that South Africa's G20 presidency presents an opportunity to put the continent's challenges on the world stage.
South Africa is not only representing herself, it's an opportunity for the whole continent. And therefore it will require that as South Africa is heading the G20, it should also be able to identify African challenges, issues that are of priority to the African continent, raise them at G20 so that our participation in the G20 should not only benefit South Africa only, should also benefit the entire continent.
It's important that we recognize how climate change is affecting food security and is impacting once again nations that are vulnerable to not only climate change but issues around food security and ensuring that poverty, hunger and inequality are alleviated. And so for Ramaphosa, not only as a South African president but an African president on this continent, to emphasize those goals, it shows that he is not only attuned to the problems that millions or hundreds of millions of Africans face, but he's also attuned to the cause of food insecurity.
South Africa assumed the presidency of the G20 on December 1st, making it the first African country to lead the organization for a rotational one-year term.
This is a good news for Africa, good news for South Africa. I believe that more opportunities will come because Ramaphosa is also the president of South Africa. South Africa is one of the top countries in Africa, and I believe that more changes will happen because he's now the G20 president.
I think it will help other African leaders to have that belief that, okay, now we can have someone in the G20 who can have a say, because African leaders have been excluded in having a voice.
Meanwhile, the Nigerian government has signaled a desire to join the G20 group, and South Africa says it will support Nigeria's bid.